On September 17, 1944, 2 days after Marines came ashore on Peleliu, a Corsair dropped out of the white Pacific glare and did something its designers had not built it to do. It did not stay high. It did not roll into a textbook dive. It came in low enough that men crouched against the coral could see the gull wings flash above the ridge. For a few seconds, the fighter looked wrong. Too big, too fast, too blind in the nose. A machine made to chase aircraft through empty sky was now aimed at cave mouths carved into stone. Then the bomb fell. The Corsair clawed upward. The ridge vanished in dust. And the Marines who had been pinned under Japanese fire understood something no pre-war manual had understood. The aircraft's worst flaw had become part of the weapon. The F-4U Corsair had been born from a very different question. How fast could the Navy make a fighter? Not how close could it work beside infantry. Not how precisely could it hit a cave aperture. Not how well could it crawl over broken jungle and coral while men on the ground talked it onto a target. The Corsair was built around a huge Pratt & Whitney double wasp engine, a broad propeller, and a bent gull wing that made the whole aircraft look like it had been designed by force instead of elegance. It was powerful enough to embarrass many enemy fighters. It was also difficult. Its long nose hid whatever sat directly in front of the pilot at low angles. Its early carrier landings were unforgiving. It could bounce, float, stall one wing, or punish a man who handled it like a tame machine. So the Navy had every reason to treat it carefully. But the Marines were not trying to nurse it onto a deck. They were fighting from island strips, hacked out of mud, crushed coral, and captured Japanese runway. And on Peleliu, that difference mattered, because the problem waiting in the ridges was not an aircraft problem. It was a geometry problem. Bloody Nose Ridge was not a clean target. It was a broken limestone fortress. Caves, firing slits, reverse slope positions, tunnels, and bunker mouths placed where a ship offshore could fire for hours and still leave the defenders alive. Before the landing, American guns had hammered the island. From the beach, it looked like enough. From inside the rock, it was not. Japanese engineers had learned to stop building positions that looked impressive from the outside. They built positions that disappeared. Naval shells could tear the surface open and still miss the chamber that mattered. Bombs dropped from safe altitude could shake dust loose and still leave the gun alive. That was the trap. The Americans had overwhelming firepower. The Japanese had made it land in the wrong place. A normal doctrine answer was altitude. Stay high enough to see the target. Stay high enough to survive the blast. Stay high enough to avoid the worst small arms fire coming up from the ground. That made sense on paper, but on Peleliu, paper was losing to rock. At 10,000 feet, a tiny aiming error had room to grow. Wind, release timing, aircraft movement, target angle, and the simple difficulty of seeing a dark cave mouth against pale coral could turn a careful attack into a miss that helped no one. At a few hundred feet, the error cone shrank. The target got larger. The delay between decision and impact collapsed, and suddenly, a fighter that seemed far too fast for close support could put the bomb where the infantry actually needed it. If the pilot survived long enough to leave, that was the part the manuals could not make comfortable. Low-altitude bombing did not forgive hesitation. The Corsair had to cross the target, release, and pull hard while the ground came up like a wall. A bomb released too low, with the wrong fuse, could kill the aircraft that dropped it. A turn made too late could put a wingtip into jungle, ridge, or smoke. 1 second too much confidence could become wreckage. So the Marines did not solve the problem by becoming reckless. They solved it by becoming exact. They learned which runs could use instantaneous fuses and which ones needed a small delay. They learned how much speed gave control without carrying them past the aim point too fast. They learned how to use the Corsair's stability instead of fighting its size. And they learned the most important trick of all. They stopped treating the long nose as a reason not to attack. Instead, they changed the attack. A straight-in approach made the target disappear under the engine cowling. So experienced pilots curved the final line. They came around in a shallow bank, keeping the cave mouth or bunker slit visible off the nose until the final seconds. The aircraft was still dangerous. The sight picture was still ugly. But now the flaw had a procedure wrapped around it. That is where the Corsair became terrifying. Not because it was perfect, because Marine pilots found the one angle where its imperfections stopped controlling the fight. The F4U-1D gave them the strength to make that angle matter. With water injection, the double Wasp could deliver roughly 2,250 horsepower. The aircraft could run above 400 miles per hour in the clean air, but close support was not done in the clean air. It was done lower, dirtier, heavier, with bombs and rockets under the wings and sweat inside the cockpit. At the speeds that mattered near the ground, the Corsair had a planted feel, heavy enough not to twitch like a nervous lightweight, strong enough to carry serious ordnance, tough enough to pull out hard after the pass, fast enough that a Japanese gunner had only a short window to track it before the moment was gone. That combination was the secret. A dedicated dive bomber could be precise. A fighter could be fast. The Corsair could arrive as both, then leave as neither target nor silhouette for very long. But the aircraft was only half the system. The other half was a Marine on the ground, close enough to the front to know which cave was killing people. In the Pacific, Marine close air support became personal in a way high command diagrams rarely captured. A pilot overhead might not be told, "Attack enemy defenses on the ridge." He might be told, "See the smoke left of the broken tree? The firing slit is 20 yards beyond it. Do not hit short. Friendlies are close." That kind of work demanded trust. The man in the cockpit had to trust the ground controller. The infantry had to trust a pilot they could not see for more than any seconds. And the pilot had to trust an aircraft that every cautious evaluator had warned could be too much machine at the wrong moment. Peleliu gave all three no gentle way to learn. The island burned hot. The coral cut boots apart. The ridges swallowed artillery. Marines went forward by yards, sometimes by feet, against positions that seemed dead until they fired again. A cave might survive shelling. A bunker might survive rockets. A machine gun might go silent for 20 minutes, then open on the same draw the moment stretcher bearers moved through it. That was why the Corsair mattered. Not as a glamorous fighter, not as a symbol, as a delivery system for a very specific answer. One cave, one slit, one ridge face, one moment. The rockets helped. A rack of 5-inch HVARs could rake a slope, tear into lighter positions, and shock defenders back from exposed openings. But Peleliu's limestone did not always care about rockets. Some positions needed the blunt violence of a 1,000-pound bomb placed close enough to make the rock itself fail. And that is where the low run changed the equation. A Corsair could come in under the old expectation. Not high, where the cave builders had expected American aircraft to stay. Not slow, where ground fire could settle on it. But low, hard, and guided by the same men the bunker was trying to kill. The Japanese defensive logic had been sound. American firepower would be massive. American accuracy against hidden caves would be imperfect. The ridge would endure. Then the aircraft came below the assumption. That is the part worth remembering. The Corsair did not become a close support legend because someone redesigned it into a perfect attack plane. It became one because the Marines changed the question. They stopped asking whether a fighter was supposed to do this. They asked what happened if the aircraft's power, speed, strength, and radio could be forced into the same few seconds over a target. The answer was not clean. Corsairs were damaged, pilots were killed, training accidents happened. Combat punished even small mistakes. A low-altitude attack run was not a trick a pilot learned from a paragraph. It was a habit built through nerves, math, muscle memory, and fear. That is why the result mattered, because it was not a miracle machine solving a battlefield by itself. It was a hard machine in the hands of men who understood what the battlefield was actually asking. Pre-war thinking had separated roles neatly. Fighters fought fighters. Dive bombers hit hard targets. Infantry took ground. Artillery softened defenses. But Peleliu did not respect those clean lines. A cave mouth the size of a garage door could control an entire approach. A radio call could be more important than a formation plan. The correct altitude could matter more than the aircraft's original purpose. And the Corsair, awkward as it was, had just enough of everything. Enough power to haul bombs off rough island strips. Enough stability to hold a low attack line. Enough strength to survive violent pullouts. Enough speed to cross the killing zone before defenders could fully react. Enough radio connection to turn an aircraft overhead into a weapon pointed by the men underneath it. That convergence was the real weapon, not the wing shape, not the engine alone, not the bomb alone. The weapon was the system: aircraft, pilot, controller, target, timing, and angle. Once that system worked, the Corsair stopped being an interceptor, forced into the wrong job. It became a battlefield tool the enemy had not planned for. By Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the lesson had matured. Corsairs carried bombs, rockets, napalm, and the reputation of aircraft that could get uncomfortably close to the fight. They were still fighters. They still had the speed and bite that made pilots love them. But to Marines pinned below a ridge, the label did not matter. What mattered was the sound. That rough, tearing engine note meant something heavy was coming to the exact place where survival had narrowed to a few yards of stone. There is a strange irony in that. The Corsair's long nose had been one of the reasons people doubted it. Its speed made critics worry that it would overshoot. Its power made it demanding. Its carrier manners made the Navy cautious. Every flaw was real. None of those critics were foolish for seeing the danger. They were wrong because they stopped at the danger. The Marines kept going until they found the method inside it. That is how combat changes machines. Not politely, not with clean diagrams. It takes a design meant for one kind of war, drags it into another, and asks whether the people using it can see the hidden capability before the enemy kills them. On Peleliu, the answer came in low over the coral. A fighter that was not supposed to work there came in under the ridgeline. A pilot who could not see straight ahead used a curve. A bomb that should have been too dangerous to drop so low used a delay. A radio call from the ground turned confusion into aim. And a cave built to survive American air power suddenly faced air power from an angle it had not been built to survive. The Corsair had not stopped being a fighter. The Marines had simply found the angle where a fighter could become a surgeon.